Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the the New York Mets, episode 191 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Guys, I know there's a little bit of change here. We've got a updated logo. We got some updated backgrounds. Don't be alarmed. It's the start of a new season, a start of a new era for Subway to Shane. We're going classic, the classic blue and orange. How could you not? So excited to be doing this today. I am fresh off of the what's new at Citi Field. I came from Citi Field earlier today and got to try some food. Got to talk with Chef Adam Richmond. That interview will be up at some point, maybe this week, next week when they get to Citi Field. But that was a lot of fun to be a part of. I was on New York One this past weekend doing a baseball preview with my good friend Hector Beauchamp of Yanks Morning Brew. And I got to do the panel. We'll get into that a little bit later with Dr. K, Doc Gooden at Catch a Story. That was a lot of fun. Shout out to 17 people right off the bat in here. Carlos Ortiz, Duran Rivera, Rosie K in the house, Nelson Cruz, Stanley Babbage, Brad, appreciate you all for joining the show. It is the 2025 New York Mets season preview because spring training's over, baby. It's time. It is time to get into baseball talk and regular season talk, and I thought of no better person to bring in here than my good friend Justin Fensty, Fensterman. Fensty, how you doing, baby? It's great to have you back on the show.
Dude, it's great to be here coming off an incredible, especially end of the season and the playoffs for the boys in orange and blue. And just thinking back to when you brought me on Subway to Shea last year at around this time, Tony Rivers, as what I call Anthony as we have worked together in sports media for the last couple of years. Let me tell you, I really did not expect, if you remember, I thought they were going to win fewer than 82 and a half wins. I think that was the line here. We're going to talk about that. And just a big time surprise at the end, rallying in the playoffs. You got to love an adrenaline run. But now this year proves to be whether or not this is all real or if this past season was, in fact, an end of season adrenaline run.
Yeah, and I looked back at the rundown from that. I have all my rundowns archived. I said, let me go back and see the bets and see what we did, because we're going to get into futures. We're going to get into a couple of prop bets, some team stuff, some awards. And I think I also had them around 82, 83 wins. Now, we did that show probably about a week or two before they brought JD Martinez onto the team. Right. And once he came onto the team, my win total went up to around 86 to 87 wins. They ended up getting 89 wins. JD Martinez really didn't factor too much into all of that, except for maybe the month of May where he kind of took over the team for a while and they needed some help on offense, and he did that. But we're here. We're getting ready to do this. This is a big season for the New York Mets, bringing in Juan Soto, and a lot of pressure is going to be on this team to not only get back to the postseason, but also to get back to the National League Championship Series, where we all know the Dodgers are pretty much favorites right now with all the moves they made during the offseason. But let's get into this. And, before all that, Fensty is the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports radio host, so we can't forget to talk about that. He covers the NFL. He covers the NBA. But as we all know, you see the gear on him. Huge, huge, huge Mets fan. We talked about in the last podcast, growing up through that 2006 run and so on. So love having Fensty on, being a part of this show, and love having him be a New York Mets fan. Let's get into it and start off with the starting rotation with the New York Mets.
Do we have to?
I know that is a mute point for a lot of fans right now. And I got the graphic. Let me pull it up right here, right now. This is what is set in stone, actually. Of all things right now, the rotation is what's set in stone. As you see at the bottom, which is a big asterisk there, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas to start the season on the IL. I think Frankie Montas is probably going to miss up until either June or July. Sean Manaea a little less. He's gone into a little bit of workouts here. He had a right oblique strain, started throwing again. Who'll be back in mid or late April. Montas with the high grade lat strain. He's out until June. But the rotation as, started, who would have thought that a reliever closer from the New York Yankees would be the New York Mets opening day starter Clay Holmes, going into number 2, Tyler McGill, who always finds a way to get himself into the rotation. Griffin Canning, who had a great spring as well. He's a part of the rotation. David Peterson, who is an X factor for me, as well as Kodai Senga. They're ramping him up still, and they're going to have to hold him with kid gloves. He will be the number 5 starter. Fensty, what are your initial thoughts when we look at this rotation right now?
Thank goodness they have the offense that they do, because this is going to be a very experimentation type of rotation. And look, I mean, going in, it's been a little bit of a rough spring for the Mets there. You described 2 of the injuries there. These are key. I mean, I look at this rotation overall, and yeah, I'm a big Senga guy. He's on my main fantasy team as well. Very into him. But at the same time, guy barely pitched, 5 innings last year in regular season. I mean, that's the problem with the Kodai Senga right here. You don't really know the durability factor there. And when you don't really have too many safety nets, and I know that Peterson is kind of that safety net, but you'd hope to have somebody else in there. So I'm not very comfortable with this rotation at this point, but they've got such a threatening offense that I think that they could survive and not fall into the doldrums very quickly, even with Minaya and Montas out.
Kodai Senga this spring, 9 innings pitched, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. He desperately needs to stay healthy. Like I said, he'll be handled with kid gloves here. When you look at David Peterson, like I said, I think he's the X factor for this rotation. Even when all was healthy, I thought that he was he made a huge impact upon his return from hip surgery last season. 10-3 with a 2.90 ERA, had 101 strikeouts in 121 innings pitched. This spring, 15 2/3 innings pitched, 7 hits, 2 runs, 1 of them earned, 7 walks, and 12 strikeouts. Will he find that consistency? That's been his problem his whole entire career. Came up in 2020 during the pandemic year and pitched very well. 2021, an off year for him. 2022, pitched very well in the rotation, pitched very well in the bullpen when needed. 2023, obviously he got hurt, but still did not have a good season. And then he bounces back, which is the David Peterson that we're going to get when it comes to the 2025 Mets.
I think a little bit higher on the ERA side. I think you're going to be seeing him right around 3.31. He was at 2.9, I believe, last year, which is absolutely incredible for him. And he's kind of the difference when it comes to this rotation, which is why I think you like him as well, especially being lefty arm there. That's going to be huge for the Mets rotation, which is why, by the way, normally you would think maybe someone like him would be the opening day starter. But what I've been reading is the Mets kind of place this rotation strategically, which I think sometimes when we look at these rotations and who's pitching opening day and even who's starting a playoff series, especially with the way the playoffs are stacked now with the games and the extra teams, it's kind of not really telling like it was back in 1960 with the Dodgers. You knew that Don Drysdale was going to be starting opening day no matter what. It doesn't necessarily reflect the ultra top pitcher. And with the way the Mets did this rotation, I mean, they're not thinking the world necessarily of Clay Holmes, despite getting new pitches. But at the same time, they put Peterson where they put him from a strategic standpoint, right? I mean, I've been reading about that over the last couple of days.
And it's really what you have to do when you don't have that legitimate ace, and not a lot of teams do these days. There are few and far between. But when you create this rotation the way that David Stearns has put them together, you have to get creative. You have to be strategic. There's a lot of emphasis on the numbers and the analytics on how to put these guys in order. And that's why David Peterson is probably going up against Miami in the next series. The opening day starter is going to be Clay Holmes. And I don't know. I feel like Clay Holmes came into spring training and was like 3 weeks ahead of everybody else. He was already throwing 3-ups is what they wanted him to do. And he got progressively better. Now I know it's against a lot of people we're not going to be seeing, but to see him work his pitches and how well he did, 19 and a third innings pitch, 7 hits, 2 earned runs, 8 walks. He led the team with 23 strikeouts. The thing for him, he's converting from a reliever to a starter. Will Holmes become that Seth Lugo, Michael King type starting pitcher?
Yeah, I think he can actually. I mean, look, he has the big city experience already. This guy does have some experience under his belt. And look, at the end of the day, when you don't need necessarily, which even with the injuries the Mets have on the hitting side, and this is what it all comes back to. Because look, Anthony, at the end of the day, this rotation on paper, the graphic you showed, kind of cringe when you really think about it. Doesn't really look that appetizing right here. Ugh. Seriously, as of right now, the way it is, it doesn't look that appetizing. But if you can get someone like Clay Holmes used to pitching a little bit shorter, you get this guy to the 6th inning, that's fine. That's all you really need in the offense with the way it is, with that stacked lineup, especially the first 5 or 6 guys that they have. That's going to help bail out a lot of these pitchers here. And thus, by the way, and again, bringing in even things like wagering and fantasy and all that, that is going to bolster the statistics when it comes to these pitchers. The fact that they're having that strong offense behind them as well. Not going to be, hopefully, in as many pressure situations early on. But ultimately, I just think that at the end of the day, he can become that guy. And who knows, if they find a diamond in the rough, if they go at the trade deadline, get another pitcher, and it's not really working out with him going a bunch of innings, let's say months down the road, you can always put him back in the pen.
Shout out to the chat. I want to bring some of the comments that we were seeing in here. Brad, Ant with the opening day week haircut. Yes, I had to get a cut, especially for this weekend being on New York One, doing the doc panel and going to this What's New at Citi Field. And if you've seen the Subway to Shea podcast, especially around October, that we grow the playoff beard. So, you always start fresh in spring and make it look nice and clean for everyone out there. Carlos Ramos, he always in the chat, and he's been talking about this for a while. David Peterson, he thinks can go 14-7 with a 3.47 ERA. You said around 3s right up there. So is this something that you think could be possible for David Peterson?
Yes, I mean, he's taking my projection expectation and he's lengthening it. He's giving me a little bit of wiggle room. So Carlos, already my best friend on this show, besides Anthony, of course, I think that's very possible. And even with the wins, which, by the way, I always view wins as a little bit on the overrated side. But for a guy like Peterson in this rotation, 14-15, I'd say is very possible.
Couple comments from D and Stanley Babbage. Stanley saying that the starting pitchers will change when Minaya and Montas returns. More likely Minaya to start first. And then I don't know if it's so much that it's going to change, but it's going to lengthen the rotation because we're probably going to see 6 guys in the rotation now that they have decided to put Paul Blackburn in the bullpen. I think there's a lot of versatility, which is something we're going to get into when we hit to the bullpen here. D says all they got to do, survive for 1 month to let Minaya get back in here. What they can't do is, what we saw last season to start the month, which was go 3-4 innings. Sometimes they didn't even get to 5. And then all the reliance was on the bullpen. They tired out Reed Garrett. This was a time where Edwin Diaz was trying to get himself back to being 100%. And it just hurt. And by the time we got to May and that awful May that they had, the bullpen was exhausted. And then they had to replenish.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did. And that's why when it comes to them, I'm seeing in the comments there, especially Brad saying that building it to give it to the bullpen. I actually do trust this bullpen. I do like the arms, the versatility that they have. And also what we saw from Diaz at the end of the day. I mean, being Mets fans, how many times have we gotten spurned by closers, especially in big game situations? I mean, this guy, after all the crap he put the team through, all that drama that came with it, came through at the end of the day, Anthony.
They did. They did. And I like what, Rosie K saying as well. I'm hoping that Stearns rotation magic works again because I fear that this rotation will give up a lot of runs. This was my concern heading in to this offseason. Yeah, it worked that one time. But if we know anything about this team, lightning usually never strikes twice. And to expect an entire rotation to turn around and do it again, that's a lot of pressure to be put on these guys. We're still waiting to see if one, Kodai Senga gets healthy. Two, if Sean Manaea and David Peterson can be consistent, because not even Sean Manaea, let's be fair, let's be honest. Sean Manaea has not been consistent throughout his career. Maybe the new arm slot angle changes that, but it has been a tough go for him throughout his career. And hopefully he now finds it with that little side arm slot that he's got going on.
The good news is when it comes to the Mets and the way they're built, and there's always a market for starting pitching. There are always a bunch of sellers at the deadline. So if the Mets need an arm, even if it costs them down the road, prospects down the road, we're not talking about Acuna or anything like that. You're not going to trade top prospects. But if they need an average arm to get them through, there's going to be plenty of them at the deadline. That's one of the things we've seen over the last few years. People are always looking to sell. And Anthony, I'll say this, and I've heard people talk about, well, do you load up on prospects even as a good team, or do you just go for it? The way this team is built, and we're going to talk about it when it comes to this lineup, they got to go for it right now. You're trading prospects down the road. This is the window right here. Again, this year proves that last year wasn't an end of the season adrenaline run, which I think they have. I think they have one of the most threatening offenses in baseball. But being that they can get at the deadline, and there will always be a starting pitching market at the deadline for teams like the Mets that need maybe an extra piece, a final piece for that matter, depending on the health of the rotation. That's why I'm not fully sweating it with this team and this rotation, even though if they, let's say, had a rotation like they did back in 2015, you'd think it'd be them and the Dodgers and then the rest of the league miles away from them.
And you have to wonder, when do you pull that trigger on the trade? Because 2022, huge opportunity. They didn't do it. They weren't going to trade Vientos or Beatty or Alvarez, and maybe for the best, right? But now you have this plethora of position players that is in the minors that could possibly be trade bait. We saw some of them during the spring breakout. These kids are doing very well. They may be on the trade block if it comes to a point where the Mets are that one pitcher away, or maybe one bench or hitter away from making it deep into the playoffs. A lot of that hinges as well on how the Dodgers are, because everyone sees them as runaways when it comes to getting to the World Series. People are saying dynasty already. They're also saying that this team could surpass the 1998 New York Yankees. It's all good on paper. We'll see how it ends up during the season, but these are things to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, how can you not when you look at what the Dodgers have done and the way they're deferring money right now, they're changing the game. And we could go into a whole conversation about that, which we won't do. It's almost tired at this point, but it's a joke that they're still adding what little microscopic cosmetic pieces they need. They're finding a way to still add the best of the best. It's almost unfair.
Yeah, it is. And, but they could do it. They have the money. And they're deferring a lot of contracts. It's not against any rules. So they're just going to keep doing this. And I'm pretty sure once they sell the team, whoever the owners are, that old money will defer to some other owner that has to take over that. When we go back to the rotation, the final two guys I want to talk about, Tyler McGill. This guy always finds a way to get back into the rotation. He had a strong September last year and really helped this team, get to the postseason. Always, like I said, seems to find that way to get in here every year, 2022, 23, 20, every time. He just does it. But his issue is, can he go deep into games? That's going to be the problem with him, because he could give us 1, 2, 3 good innings, but if he can't give us that 4 and 5, we have a problem. And his thing is pitch count. He always runs up his pitch count.
Yeah, and again, that's why it's so funny that he's such a hanger-oner in this rotation. But again, the chat is talking about this too, and it makes absolute sense. This isn't what the rotation is going to be. I'm guessing he's the first guy out of this rotation once Manaea is ready. Is it him or is it Canning at this point? That would be first pitcher out. or would they just expand it?
I don't know. I just don't know how, Stearns is going to go about this.
Yeah.
That's the, that's he has a way, and we do got some pictures that even, Greg C, he says he wouldn't be shocked if we saw Brandon Sproat promotion in early to late April. I'm thinking for him kind of the same trajectory as what we saw from Christian Scott last season.
Wow, that would be crazy, man. I mean, look, at this point, they could use all the depth that they could get. And it's almost like, how do they have room with some of the pitchers that are already in the pen there? So I'm just very interested because they've got two guys coming back. One, like you said, with Montas not coming back until around mid-season. So I'm very interested to see how exactly they handle promotions on the pitching spot.
The final pitcher in the rotation, Griffin Canning, probably one of the worst pitchers in the league last year.
But they see something in him.
They definitely see something in him. He had a great spring, 14 and a third innings pitched, gave up 11 hits, but only 3 earned runs, 5 walks, 22 strikeouts. He's second in strikeouts for this team during the spring. This right here is a true test for Jeremy Hefner and the pitching lab. We are going to find out what they are made of when we see what happens with Griffin Canning during the season.
Here's the thing with Griffin Canning, though. This is a big thing, and a lot of our topics are, can these guys end up going a certain amount of innings? He gets strikeouts. I mean, that's one of the things that he does get. He does get a decent amount of strikeouts, and I know he's at at this point, 140 or 130 last year. I mean, that's decent enough. I think that he could get you through 5. But again, like you said, last year, this guy was horrible there. And the Mets think that they could just turn him around just like that. Didn't have to pay too much. And hey, good spring, can use the extra arm. So let's see if the magic can continue in the regular season.
Carlos Ramos saying about Tyler McGill and the reason he hasn't developed, that he's built for the bullpen like his brother. He has 2 good innings in him, but doesn't have more than that. Brad saying his stuff is not good 2 or 3 times through the order. Now, I don't know if he's talking about McGill there or if he's talking about Kenny. He could be talking about both. I mean, we know that these guys have just had a hard time getting deep into games, and the Mets need at least, a couple of these pitchers. Like, they don't have Luis Severino, who is eating innings, right, whether good or bad. Luis Severino ate a lot of innings for this team. And if the Mets don't have that, right, because you're not going to see Kodai Senga go 6-7 innings.
I was just about to ask you that. Do you see him go 7 at all? And
I don't see it. It took him until August of 2023 to finally get in the groove. They are going to have to, especially with him coming back from the injury, he is going, like I said, is going to be handled with kid gloves. And the only guy that maybe I could see going deeper into games is honestly Clay Holmes, ground ball pitcher. If he's got great defense behind him, he could be in and out of innings really quickly and not throwing a lot of balls and more strikes, and getting these guys, inducing these ground balls is going to be huge. Suffered on the Yankees because they had bad defense, but we're talking about different defense here in Queens. So Carlos Ortiz saying, I've asked this on other shows, do we have a 20-game winner and someone who pitches a complete game? I'm going to say no to the 20-game winner. To a complete game, we only had 1 complete game last season, and that was Luis Severino. So I'm going to say we don't.
I don't think so. Not with this
rotation. Don't bet on that over-under.
No. That's no if you can.
Yes, definitely stay away from that. As we move on here to the bullpen, and I got the graphic up for that for you guys here. Here we go. Edwin Diaz will be closing, obviously. Ryan Stanek's going to be making the bullpen. Reed Garrett, Danny Young, Jose Budo, Paul Blackburn, and there is a empty spot for one of these final men here. AJ Minter, Max Kranick, Huascar Brazoban. Daniel Nunez got optioned to AAA. I just think that they are going to be ramping him up slowly. We know he will be there when time comes and when he is needed. But right now, the Mets could use 2 lefties. I think there's I could be wrong, but I think there's 2 spots open here for the bullpen if that's how they're going to carry it in the 26th man. But AJ Minter, he's also coming back from injury with his hip. So right now they have Danny Young in there. Maybe both of them get carried. I always like to have 2 lefties in the pen.
I kind of thought we were going to see Minter there at the end of the day.
I think he will. He felt healthy. He felt good. But I do think there's still another spot. I could be wrong here, but I think there are 2 spots available. So I probably should have put an extra one there. And that they're talking about either Max Kranick or Huascar Brazaban. We saw Brazaban last season. I really thought that he was going to be the gem at the trade deadline for this New York Mets team, and he was not good. They even optioned him and sent him down. You look at Max Kranick, and he has had a stellar spring. I think he has a 1.46 ERA. Brazaban has a 1.69 ERA in the spring. But we're looking at a guy, Max Kranick, almost last season. He almost made the rotation. If he did not get hurt, he would have been in the starting rotation. I think he's earned the right to be in this bullpen if they do decide to carry the extra man alongside AJ Minter. I assume if they do send Minter down, it's for the same reasons as the Daniel Nunez as they try to ramp him up.
Right. And here's the thing with Kranick too. Look, like you're saying, if he has the starting, potential in him, you can use him for about 3 or 4 innings in those Senga games. That's where you can kind of help out. And I think that's where Paul Blackburn, not great spring, Paul Blackburn is also going to be utilized as well. Because again, going back to the big topic of conversation with what the first month and a half of the season is going to look like for the Mets, it's going to be a lot of bridge gapping when it comes to this rotation. So while we're talking about whether or not these guys are going to be able to go 5 or 6, we don't have a lot of confidence that most of this rotation is going to be able to do that regularly. The chat seems to be in agreement as well. So you can have a few guys and get through a rotation essentially one time. You don't know where in that rotation they're going to start, like a Blackburn, like a Kranick as well. I think that's very safe. Almost view them as B-lister starting pitchers, like the old NWOB team back in the day.
And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if with the versatility that this bullpen has, the way that they'll be able to use a guy like Paul Blackburn for multiple innings, Jose Budo, like you've mentioned here, I think it is huge to have these guys that could just pitch. Reed Garrett can as well. And I think Edwin Diaz, once he gets ramped up, he's shown to go to multiple innings as well. But the thing with Edwin Diaz is, which Edwin Diaz are we getting this season? I'm not saying that 2022 Edwin Diaz is coming back, but I do need something a little bit better than what we saw from him last season.
Right. I mean, and look, I know more teams are doing this now. Do you put the entire burden on him? I know Mets fans are going to even think I'm crazy for asking that, but yeah, Diaz is a wild card. I mean, at times, maybe try somebody else out in the 9th inning. A lot of teams are doing that now, Anthony, and I think it's smart, and they're doing it for a lot of reasons. Their matchups have become, with the age of analytics, matchups have become more privy. And also the other thing is to protect against those closers that continuously bomb out in the 9th inning. I mean, maybe try getting somebody else in there at times, just at times, just to relieve Diaz a little bit so the pressure's not on him. Because one of the things we did see with Diaz, and it's almost like, it's hook, line, and sinker for every Mets closer that we've had for the last 30 years. They get into trouble very quickly and somehow just skate by the skin of their teeth, and that's it.
When we think about, is this going to be very pressure filled for Edwin Diaz? We've seen him come in the 6th inning during the postseason. I mean, they had to put that pressure on him because there was nobody reliable to get 1-2 outs against the Dodgers or against the Phillies. So they had to go to Edwin Diaz for multiple innings in a game. This year, I feel like is a little bit different. We saw Ryan Stanek, who probably was the best pitcher, best reliever to come out of the bullpen for the Mets during the postseason. We saw that he can close a couple of games. We know that AJ Minter has gotten some saves before. I think outside of Danny Young and Paul Blackburn, I think everyone else in that bullpen, Jose Budo, Reed Garrett, he's closed a couple of games. I think they can close some games if Edwin Diaz, is unable to do it. But we all know, Edwin Diaz will fight to, stay in games. We saw it in Atlanta for the team to get into the postseason. He got beat up in that 8th inning with a 3-run lead, and then he comes out and he gets the job done the inning later. He didn't want to get taken out. So we know that Edwin Diaz is a fighter. He's a competitor, and we'll see how they rally around him and make this bullpen more complete.
Yeah, I mean, last year, when you just saw him just getting crushed or whatever, 2022, Edwin Diaz, nothing was being done about it. I mean, everybody obviously complaining, and then finally something was done about it. Here, okay, you maybe give him a couple of days extra rest there. He's getting blown up game after game. After 2 or 3, it's enough already. Bring somebody, and they should be fine to do that. It's not going to take away the mental edge from Edwin Diaz. If anything, it's going to force him to not just throw with extra power and throw out his arm. And here we are again with no Edwin Diaz trying to go on a run.
Yeah.
I'm very into closer by committee now because of that, that pressure that these 9th inning guys have had for years and years.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it now, knowing that the bullpen is so much more important now than it has been in the past, where starting pitchers could go 7-8 innings, and then you may get the closer to come in or a long reliever to come in to finish the game. Now, every inning is of the utmost importance for every piece of the bullpen that comes in. I mean, look at Edwin Diaz came in game 2 against the Phillies in the 6th inning just to get to Kyle Schwarber. You take him out, and then you have to rely on everyone else to come in the game and get the business done. But I think with the bullpen that we have on paper, to me, looks like what you said, where they don't have to rely on Edwin Diaz to be closing day in, day out, come in for 2 innings to get 6 outs. I don't think they're going to have to do that when you have guys like Reed Garrett, who we'll talk about next. I think, like I mentioned about David Peterson being the X factor of the rotation, I think that Reed Garrett could be the X factor of this bullpen for what he did most of last season. He basically carried the bullpen through April.
Yeah,
because he did that, he got hurt and got fatigued, but came back strong during the latter half of the season. So I think that he's going to be a huge part of this bullpen, whether they use him for multiple innings or just to come in and get 3 outs.
How do you feel about him when it comes to his walks? Because I feel like when you were talking about it with the overuse, the walks started to definitely pop up. He was shut down at first. Yeah. No one could hit this guy. And then immediately you notice that the walks started to pile up.
He was challenging Aaron Loop in the first month of the season for that under 1 ERA.
Right.
That's how good he was.
Right.
Everyone on this team, we have to worry about walks, right? I mean, that's the big problem with the Mets pitching staff throughout the entire season into the postseason, is how is Jeremy Hefner in the pitching lab going to fix all of these walks that take place? And the Mets had paid a deep price once they walked a lot of batters. If he could limit the walks, I think that he is a big deal, as well as a guy, and this is I'm a huge, he's an ant guy. I'll say it like that. He's an ant guy, like a Paul Heyman guy. He's an ant guy. Jose Budo finally is now exclusively a part of the bullpen. They made the decision not to make him be a part of that rotation chase. Even with all the injuries that happened, they still said Jose Budo is going to be in the bullpen. And I think this is the right move to have him be able to ramp up. We saw towards the latter half, the end of the season, into the postseason, if you used him for 1 or 2 innings, you weren't seeing him again for 3, 4, maybe even 5 days.
But that's okay, because again, like we've been saying, they've got guys in this pen that could go multiple innings, and they don't have to do I was going to bring this example up to you. Here's an example. Let's say Senga pitches 6 great innings, 6 shutout innings. Pitch count a little bit up, though. They're taking him out. I mean, we're not talking no-hitter. 6 shutout innings, though. Now you bring in, let's say, Paul Blackburn. If Paul Blackburn, let me ask you this, then pitches 2 shutout innings, and let's say the Mets are up 3-0, would you be okay with sending out Blackburn again?
If I see him cruising, if I
Yes.
see, good
Any of these
peripherals,
guys cruising that takes over for Senga in the 7th inning, let's just say, will you let them pitch it out?
I think it's fine. I mean, if it's 3-0, I might send to get Edwin
Okay.
Diaz up and running because it's a save opportunity. You're
Right.
talking about maybe 4-0, maybe, once the
Okay.
save opportunity is out
That's
of the way,
fair.
maybe throw Paul Blackburn in there. Because he's
Right.
going to be that long man, that swing man. He'll make spot starts. He's going to be that Trevor Williams type. Hopefully he can be as good as Trevor Williams was for us.
Right. No, that's going to be very interesting. Because again, they're going to need that bullpen, and that's the first 2 months of the season. There, because even when Minaya comes back, we don't know. I mean, look, he's going to obviously have rehab starts and everything, but once he gets back up to the major league level, I mean, I always account for this. I don't know if you do as well. I then give these pitchers like a 2 or 3 like wiggle room start before wondering, is something wrong, or are we destined for trouble, or is everything going to be okay? Because I can't just expect these pitchers that are starting playing from behind the 8 ball to just come back even after rehab starts and be just as in line and in sync and ready to roll.
Yeah, and that's why they're sending Sean Manaea to do a full spring. Already throwing, I think he was throwing at 60 feet. They're going to do 60, 90, 120 for him. And they're going to ramp him up. They're not going to rush him. That's what they've done with the pitchers over the last year. And that's why, even though the rotation did not look great last year on paper, somehow by the end of the season, they were good enough in September. I mean, Jose Quintana only gave up 3 earned runs all of September. He was awful. I wanted him off this team in July. I wanted him traded at the deadline. And he came in and he was the best pitcher we had, even in the postseason. So I have full confidence in what David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza are going to do to ramp these pitchers up. That's not for them to be ready now. Yes, they do have to be, ready to start and be ready for opening day, but it's to have them fully 100% by the time we get to the trade deadline into August, September, and that push for the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't necessarily want to have them make a trade at the deadline. I mean, you want them at this point. They're already dealing with the injuries, like you're saying. If you have to limit certain pitchers, and look, it's going to hit their stats a little bit. Who gives a damn? You just went to the NLCS. And by the way, taking the Dodgers to 6 games, World Series, Dodgers didn't go to 6 games. Just saying right there. The window is so small at this point that you have to preserve what you have in this rotation. So I'm lockstep with you there.
All right, now we head to what is the big part of this team, that lineup, the bench. We got to take a look at it because this New York Mets team right now, Francisco
Beautiful.
Lindor at the top of the lineup, Juan Soto probably batting second. You have Pete Alonso third returning. Mark Vientos, Brandon Nimmo, I think are going to flip-flop 4 and 5 when it comes to, I guess, if it's righty-lefty split, they'll flip-flop between 4 and 5. Starling Marte, Jesse Winker DHing. You have Jose Siri in center field. I don't know how they're going to do the bottom of the lineup, whether Siri's ahead, maybe Brett Beatty gets to be ahead. Luis Torrens is going to be starting with Francisco Alvarez out on injury. You got to look at the bench. Tyrone Taylor, Hayden Sanger probably will be the backup catcher. Luis Angel Acuna. Now, I put stars next to a couple names because they have not, at this moment in time, said that these guys are going to be on the opening day roster, but I am projecting that they will be. What do you think? Looking at this lineup right now, Fensty, what are your thoughts? Obviously, the top half, maybe even top 6, look very strong. But with Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez being hurt right now, the bottom of the lineup kind of takes a little bit of a hit here.
Right. And that's why, by the way, I mean, look, the big question is Jose Siri, what you're going to get out of him here. But let me ask you this. I mean, I know right now with the way you have it slotted with Brett Beatty in there. Why not put Acuna in there, man? Let the kid play. Let's see what he could do. He's going to look at the stacked top of the lineup. Somebody's got to get pitches to hit. This guy is going to be getting pitches to hit in an average MLB lineup. I mean, it would be a little bit of a different situation, but these guys got to get pitches to hit at some point. You can't walk every one of these Mets batters. Why not just start the season, start Acuna? You traded Scherzer and you took on money just to get this guy. You've been talking about him for years. At this moment, he's not even guaranteed. It's looking like he's going to be with the roster. That's not even guaranteed. Dude, just let the guy freaking start. Let him get some soft pitching early and get that confidence and mojo running. And then maybe before you know it, he's better than you expect. He isn't Acuna after all. You know the talent's going to be there. That's why they got him in the Scherzer deal. I don't know why they just don't start with him there in that starting lineup opening day.
Yeah, you want Acuna playing every day. We saw what he could do. I mean, he was put in a high pressurized situation with Francisco Lindor, who's having an MVP type season, out with the back injury. He came in and filled that slot pretty well. I know he kind of tailed off towards the end. Pitchers kind of started to figure him out, but that should not be for nothing. I mean, we've seen players come up and not do a dang thing. And here comes Acuna, helps this team get big wins when they needed to. The thing is, you look at Brett Beatty's spring to Acuna's spring. Brett Beatty batted .353, had 4 homers, 11 RBIs. I think that's what seals the deal for Brett Beatty. I mean, he's had a really good, there's nothing that I can say. Like, if someone says, okay, Brett Beatty has to start second, I'd be like, I guess. How can I argue right now when he's had such a great spring? And we've seen it in the past, right? Yep. He has a great spring. He plays well down in AAA. He comes to the major leagues, and he's not good. But is it something where, like Mark Vientos, it took time for him to develop? I'm pretty sure, the question that this Mets team wants to find out. They want to see if he can either develop, or if he plays well, maybe he's a part of the trade bait that we talked about earlier. Who are they going to rely on? Because Acuna is the better defender, right? We can all say better defender at second base. He can back up Francisco Lindor when he needs a day off at shortstop. So that's where his versatility comes into play. Brett Beatty, on the other hand, he's played third. He's learning second. He's played a little bit in the outfield, but he's just not been able to live up to the hype when it comes to his plate appearances.
Right. I mean, and look, I'm fine with riding it out, and I'm fine with starting with Beatty in that regard, but short leash him. Seriously. Don't, this guy's sitting there hitting, let's say, I don't know, 235, let's, like you just outlined, and this is why Acuna is so great to have and exciting. The defense that you're getting out of him still, you're not downgrading in that department. So if you want to start with Brett Beatty for the first month and see how he does, he brings power. This guy hits 250, 260. Okay, then you save Acuna for when and if there's another injury to this lineup. But here's the deal. When McNeil comes back, what do you do with Acuna? You have him starting up. Let's say he's platooning. Let's say he's coming in. He's actually hitting well. Then you have Jeff McNeil coming back eventually. What do you do with Acuna at that point? That's why I want to get him more integrated now. I don't want him sent anywhere. I think that this guy is the future, along with Vientos. I know Vientos, everyone's worried about the sophomore slump. I think that this guy is the future. I was so pumped to get him. Even trading Scherzer and how that whole fiasco with Scherzer and Verlander going down, very sad time. That was the one bright light. And I want to make sure he's not going everywhere and he's up and down anymore.
Yeah, because we know that if Jeff McNeil, and when Jeff McNeil comes back, that he's going to get the starting role, whether it's Beatty or Acuna. So you want Acuna, like I said, playing every day. Give him the opportunity. Maybe he does. Maybe he does, because as one of the comments,
maybe he sucks in April. Maybe he sucks in April and May. But you know what? You give him a couple of months, you'd have to think again. Someone's got to see pitches down the middle. And because the Mets top half even more is so stacked and you can't really get around those guys, that bottom of the order, unlike other teams that aren't as stacked, this is at least my opinion and thought process, normal, an average MLB team doesn't have the kind of lineup that the Mets do in their first 6. So someone has to see pitches. So in this particular lineup, I just think Acuna is that guy to see those pitches because you're going to have runners on base a lot of the times when he's up. There's nowhere to run and hide. You got to throw him down the middle. Normal team, I totally get it. You want to keep this guy on ice as long as you can for development. Here in this particular lineup, I think this guy sees pitches, and I think it makes him a better hitter early.
Worst case scenario when it comes to Acuna, and I'm going to throw this 2006 reference at you. He's Anderson Hernandez. Great defender. Great defender, but just can't hit.
Better than Marlon Anderson, right?
Yes.
How about that for a reference for you?
When it comes to the catching here, and I had a comment from, who was it? That's Deron Rivera. Sanger and Torrens are going to shut down opposition running game. You look at what we've seen through the spring. Obviously, Luis Torrens, we know, is a really good defender.
Yep.
Hayden Singer has proven to be one down in AAA as well as during this spring. With Francisco Alvarez out, the emphasis on getting a bat here and just having this defensive type of catcher is pretty big for them, especially with Alvarez being out 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. And again, at that point, it's all about run prevention here with this pitching staff. Anything that you can do, that's great. You don't want players because, again, man, and look, they've had offensive catchers in the past. Paul LaDuca. Who didn't love having Paul LaDuca? That was great, but you could run all day on Paul LaDuca. That was the problem. How many of these catchers that we had over time where you could just run all day on them? I like the Ramon Castro defensive catchers that have a little pop to them. That was always my thing because, again, I like that plate protection, and he could get you a little bit of power on the side. So I'm totally fine with that, and Torrens with filling in.
Going to first base, obviously Pete Alonso returns after a long contract negotiations for him. It's so important when you add a guy like Juan Soto that you also bring back Pete Alonso. Very huge for this lineup. A reason why I see big success coming out of the top of that lineup. But he does need to bounce back this season with runners in scoring position. He was awful last season.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad. I mean, I'll tell you this, and I think a lot of Mets fans, and maybe even you'd agree with this, were you ready to send this guy packing up until the moment that he hit the home run against Milwaukee? Because I have a Pete Alonso shirtsy. I had it in my hand, ready to walk to the garbage to throw it away. Because I'm not going to wear it. If he's not on the team anymore, he doesn't want to be. Money. I don't want you. I don't need to wear the Pete Alonso shirtsy. And then all of a sudden hits that home run, saves the season. You knew that was going to cost the team money. It was going to change the entire game after that. Were you ready? I guess the market was different before that home run was hit. Were you ready to see this guy walk?
I was at the point where, like, if they did not re-sign him, I would have been like, I got it. Like, you know, it would have been okay. Like, I would have gotten the reason why they didn't. I mean, when he dropped that ball in foul territory in the 8th inning, I was like, is this how this like, it's fitting how this would have ended considering the season that he had. And you look at the numbers, you know, peripherally, you're like, wow, that's a pretty solid season for anyone to have over 30 home runs and over 80 RBIs. But man, he struggled with runners in scoring position until the postseason. And I think that somewhat helped the Mets kind of say, you know what, let's reconsider and figure out a way to bring him back, even though I don't know if it was him who was selfish or if it was Scott. Well, obviously Scott Boras is a part of that.
He's very selfish.
Yeah. This market just wasn't going to work for Pete Alonso because there were a lot of good options at a cheaper price. Now, if he was going into free agency next year, which he still has the opportunity to do with a guy like Vladimir Guerrero, who's asking for $500 million, I think next year will benefit him more if he goes into free agency than now does.
I'm going to make a prediction right here, right now. This year will very likely, I guess I have to make, this will be the last year that Pete Alonso was with the New York Mets.
He'll break the home run record.
It sucks. You want to think that for the next 5 to 7 years, this is what you're looking at. Dude, Scott Boras got played. Scott Boras got at that point. You never see Scott Boras get got like that. He did. It was embarrassing. And part of the issue was that Pete wants to stay with the Mets. He loves being with the Mets. That's part of the issue right there. And with the offers that he had and everything. You mentioned Toronto, right? I mean, you don't think in that kind of situation, like Toronto can go right back after him on a little bit of a cheaper rate compared to Vladdy? I mean, at the end of the day, you look at Pete Alonso and you have to think that this contract, the way it was structured, was okay. You're going to go, you're in, once again, your contract year. You're playing for another contract. The market didn't want you, Pete, this year. We wanted this. You had amazing playoff moments, but people saw your regular season. The market didn't want you at that price. You got shut out virtually almost of the entire market, and you come back to the Mets here. And the reason why this deal is the way it is, Anthony, is because he's opting out no matter what at the end of the season, and he's going to get his bag, whether it's on shorter terms from another team. Boras is this is his revenge narrative right here. Pete Alonso hits 40, 43 home runs. It's done. He's gone. I'll be sad. We'll all be sad, but that's what I'm mentally preparing for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, we're all going to have to prepare for that. I got my Alonso shirt on now. So we'll see what happens with it towards the end of the season. Hopefully, it ends with a world championship ring being put on his finger.
I would love that. And I would love that. And look, you know what? When Alonso hit that home run, whatever shirt I had on, other Met shirt, I took it off and I put that Alonso shirtsy right back on. I'm down to it. I have been on the wrong side of being a Mets fan so many times, and that moment was just so magical in the way that Gary, as he was walking to the plate, was being like, wow, Pete Alonso, you talk about it, the year he's had up to this moment, what a moment he's up against right now. He hits a home run off of Devin Williams. I mean, it's like it's unseen. You can't write that kind of theatrics. And I want Pete Alonso to remain a Met for the next 5 to 7 years in the prime of what we have in the Soto contract. I love that. But the way this deal was structured is so he can opt out next year.
And that's probably what we're going to see.
And it pisses me the hell off. Because I want to fall in love with this team. I want a team like you talk about the Yankees from the 90s. The Yankees had a very similar team throughout that late 90s run. Very similar. Not many changes in that lineup. We as Met fans should want that too. But with the way this deal is and Scott Boras really getting crushed from this entire deal, you got to think that he's going to be out for a bunch of revenge to make it right next offseason.
Yeah. I mean, Scott Boras always tries to get what he wants. It goes really well for the superstars in the league, right, but not so much for the good to okay type players that he has on his. They'll be waiting until mid-season to get deals with some of them.
And I'm sorry I just got angry about that. It's just, again, I want to fall in love with this team. Opt-outs make me think, what's this lineup going to look like 2 years from now? And it's unfortunate, but that's honestly a big incentive for a guy like Alonso, a power player like that, having the opt-out. So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
A guy who is here for probably his whole career, Francisco Lindor, MVP type season last year. His thing is, one, can Lindor get off to a hot start? Because they really need that to happen after a terrible start in April last year. And number two, will we see another MVP type season with Soto hitting behind him?
Ooh, from a statistical standpoint, I think it'll be within range, but I don't think it'll be as deadly as it was. But the problem is this, and you can tell me what you think of this. A lot of these awards in sports these days are very stat-based. Doesn't mean Lindor can't be the ultimate X factor on this team getting started. The thing started off right. If I remember correctly, Jose Reyes, I believe, was second in MVP in 2006 to Ryan Howard. Jose Reyes was not your power 40 home run, 30 home run hitter, but he was a guy that stole a bunch of bags, great leadoff spot guy, and was always getting on base, had your 300 average. That's what Lindor can do once again. And that's why even with Soto, he can still be that X factor starting at the top with him. And I love it.
Speaking of X factors, Mark Vientos, the player I'm keeping my eyes on the most, if he is anything like he was last year, this lineup only gets better and better and better. I have full confidence that we are not going to see this sophomore slump from Mark Vientos. And I'd say that because, just look at how he handled the postseason. He had probably, outside of Daniel Murphy, the best offensive postseason that any Met has had.
Right. I was at 2 games, by the way, during that run. I was at game 1 of the NLCS with the Cubs against the Cubs. He hit a home run there. And then I was at game 3 of the World Series where I forget if he homered or not there. David Wright did, but he was still amazing. But yes, the sophomore slump is the biggest question with this guy. I was looking up and I'm trying to find this chart that I was looking on him before. I was looking on Baseball Reference, which, by the way, I love nerding out there so much, just looking to see the discrepancies in the stats and all that. But I was looking and he wasn't hitting the ball as hard as he was, in previous years before last year. So that's one of the things I've noticed, the hard hit rate going down a little bit with him. I don't think we see that slump from him. Again, the pressure that's going to be on him. And that's why the one thing I was surprised about was where he was going to hit in the order, because I thought, before the season even began, I thought when I was putting this lineup together that it was going to be Alonso hitting cleanup, and maybe you put Nimmo in that 3 spot or Nimmo in the 2 and then Soto at the 3. So, at this point with Vientos, with what he can do at the 5 or the 6, I think at the 5, you're looking at 20, 25 home runs from him again?
Yeah. Even if you bring in his postseason stats, he could have over 30 home runs.
Right. Look, I'm looking at some of the lines on him right now. The books are expecting big things from him from an RBI standpoint. Looking at it right now, 83.5 RBIs. They're expecting, from what I see with that he's going to be the one that's going to be getting more of the pitches to hit. Like we were just talking about with Acuna. They think he's going to go up that much. That's where I almost want to bet the under right there.
Yeah. What did we say? We said off air 71 RBIs, right? Was it 71 RBIs for him? I think he could do a lot better if he could find consistency. He does have a tendency, and I've seen this in him, to swing at pitches like Pete Alonso does. And that would be my only concern. But with him last season, I think a big thing was anytime pitchers were able to get a hold of him and put him into these slumps, he just got right back out of them. He never had a prolonged slump. And with the way he played all season and in the postseason, I have no doubt that this kid is going to be something big. And like he is Swaggy V. So we'll see. We'll see if Swaggy V can, have another top-notch season. Brandon Nimmo is a guy, 23 homers last year, 90 RBIs. He had 90 RBIs, and that was a rough season for him offensively. I'm pretty sure a lot of fantasy players did not like having Brandon Nimmo on their team because his second half, and I think a lot of it had to do with the plantar fasciitis. He needs to stay healthy, maybe play some time at DH. He's got the knee issue as well. We saw him ramp up a little bit towards the end of spring and play a little more left field. But, what are your thoughts on Brandon Nimmo and how he will factor in not only to the lineup, but just, playing defense as well?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I'd like to see him hitting a little bit higher, maybe in that. I would take 240 and similar stats to what he had, and I think that's very doable in this lineup with where he's going to be. I was actually going to ask you who you think ends up having the better year between him and Vientos there, with all the fear surrounding him and maybe declining a little bit or regressing a little bit from last year, because that's where, for me, I don't know. We were talking about the potential swap in the lineup between the two. Where do you place these guys? I think Nimmo does have that capability to hit 240, 245 this year.
I think he can. I think he could get himself back. I don't know if it was he was stuck in the middle of a transition of not being at the top of the lineup and being that guy that would get on base with the on base percentage and the walks, and being more of a guy that had to drive in runs. He had to be the run provider. So maybe he's looking for more power. And considering that he had a good amount of home runs in 2023, this year, maybe he was looking too much for it, and it threw him off. He's got to get back to the game that works best for him. The home runs will come. The RBIs will come in the spot that he's in, but he has to be Brandon Nimmo.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I think the power will keep him there. And he's at a good spot in the lineup too, as well. I mean, he'll have a few guys on base. Those RBIs will come. Hopefully that average doesn't go down further to 215, 220, or they may be in trouble because look, like we're saying, that bottom half of the lineup is also going to have to show that power too, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be getting the softer pitching.
When we look at center field, it's probably going to be more of a platoon. Jose Siri, Tyrone Taylor. I put a little asterisk around a guy like Alexander Canario because he has no options left. He came over from a trade during spring, in the middle of spring from the Cubs, batting .306 in spring training, 3 homers, 8 RBIs, 7 walks, and a 1.030 OPS. Maybe they decide to carry another bat in the lineup and go with one less pitcher, considering the fact that there's more off days in September. More off days in April. Maybe see what you can get from him if there's anything out there, because this kid was a big talent when it comes to the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's no other option for him at this point here, and I know the chat's been talking about that too, you might as well try him out. Like you said, it's not like they're fully healthy here and you're overloading. They've got multiple injuries on the hitting side. See if you get some pop out of this guy.
And who knows with a guy like Jose Siri, yes, he can hit over 20 home runs and probably get some good RBIs, but the guy hits close to, 200. Like that's something that could be concerning. And I know that Harrison Bader wasn't the best, but he did, he was clutch for the first half of the season. So that's what we're expecting to see from a guy like Jose Siri, and hopefully he could provide that. As Carlos Ramos saying, Jose Siri, he thinks will hit 20 home runs.
I mean, honestly, that would be so ideal. That would be great if he were to get those at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yemin Medina saying that the rule is 13 pitchers, 13 position players. So we'll see how creative David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza get when it comes to those, final, 3 or 4 spots in the lineup. The final guy, we talked about him last. Juan Soto has been as advertised this spring. 4 homers, 9 RBIs, 1.186 OPS. What more is there to say about this guy? He's always on his game. We'll see what happens with him playing right field. Obviously, he was a great player when he was on the New York Yankees. As soon as he comes to the Mets, he's a bad defender. He's bad at this. He's bad at that. I think that Juan Soto, and I mentioned this on my hit on New York One, that not only does he change the culture in the clubhouse, but he changes this lineup and he transforms this lineup into being way better. Look at what he did with the Yankees lineup last year. Now, maybe they're better this year, but you look at the Yankees lineup last year, you take Juan Soto out of that, they're not great. No. Outside of Aaron Judge. And don't give me Giancarlo Stanton either, because he's a great postseason player. No, I won't even doubt that. He's a monster postseason player, but you got to get him there. And Juan Soto helped that offense along with Aaron Judge get there. You look at this Mets lineup, this Juan Soto has a WAR over, you want to say 8, probably. He could help this team, and we'll get into, Met futures and team futures and wins over under. He could add probably about 4 or 5 wins to his team with his bat alone.
Are Mets fans actually complaining about Juan Soto, or just like the critics that are jealous Yankees fans and jealous Yankees writers that realize that for one time, the Mets got one over on the big brother? One time, Juan Soto chose them
Yep.
over the Yankees. I don't know how anyone can. Yeah, you obligate the years and whatever. So what? I mean, at the end of the day, you're hoping that in the next 15 years, you're getting one championship out of it. Anybody would be happy with one championship in those 15 years, no matter what they're paying the guy. I don't know how any Mets fan can complain about Juan Soto at this point.
No,
It was
I
a
think,
nice
yeah, I think it's the latter. It's more of the Yankee fan still having to drink some of that copium and cope with the losses. They never thought that this was going to happen, like you said, and it just did. And you know what? Time to move on.
Right.
It's not like they didn't put together a decent team either after they lost out on Juan Soto. You look on paper and that team is pretty decent, even though, now they're out with Garrett Cole for the season.
Yeah,
Who
that
knows
sucks.
when Stan's coming back. So this team still has an opportunity, even
I
without
love
them.
Jazz Chisholm. I would love Jazz Chisholm on the Mets.
Yeah. I mean, look, they still have an opportunity to make the postseason because the American League stinks. They just stink. They're not as good as the National. Look at the teams in the National League, Dodgers, that whole NL West. You got the Phillies, you got the Braves, you got the Mets. I mean, in the American League, outside of Houston, maybe,
right?
Like there's no Baltimore's never going to beat the Yankees. I feel like they're like the Twins facing the Yankees in the postseason every year.
Baltimore's has to stay healthy, and Baltimore has to remember that they have to hit in September. I don't know what happened, dude. I mean, me being in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, it's a pleasure watching this Baltimore Orioles team. They're so fun. How everyone on that team, just forgot to hit right at the end of the year. That is frightening. I'd never seen anything like that before.
And that happened last year too in the postseason.
Yes,
they just didn't hit at all. So, but there's still a lot of these guys are still young. I think what was disheartening to me was this team did not do enough to me in the offseason and they let Corbin Burns go.
Yeah.
And I think it was just they got a lot of older pitchers on the team. I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about Baltimore. I think
they're
Boston
kind of in a similar situation to the Mets now, too. Very, questionable arm situation right now, but they got a hell of a lot of bats.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And when you look at other teams there, Boston is probably going to be back with the moves that they made this offseason.
Right.
So, the Yankees still can win the division, even, without Soto and without Stanton, without Cole. We'll just see, what happens for them. I did say Soto was the final player, and then I forgot DH position. How can I do that? Starling Marte, Jesse Winker. What do you think of those two guys in the lineup platooning when it comes to DH? I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot more of Jesse Winker than we will of Starling Marte.
Yeah, man. You get that's the concern, man. Marte, there's always something with him, dude. There's always something. Big hits, though, late in the season, which was great, which is why you got him. But always seems like this guy gets hurt, which is why I'm very happy that they brought Winker back. Very surprised by that. I didn't think they were going to.
Yeah. I really wanted him to come back. I wanted him at the trade deadline just to get him off of our back after all the torture he's been giving us over the years. But he really came out being a fan favorite, really had a great postseason, and I'm glad that he's back. This is the end of Starling Marte after this season. His deal is done, and the Mets can move on after that. And maybe they trade him. They were looking to trade him for some relief help, so that could still be in play if he stays healthy and plays. But that wraps up the season preview for this 2025 New York Mets team. And we're going to get into some betting. We did this last year. We're going off of DraftKings here. So I'm going to start off with doing some of the team futures. Then Fensty, I know you got a couple of prop bets and over-unders. We'll go into that. And then we'll check in on the awards and where the Mets can play here. So, when it comes to the team futures betting preview, we're going to do over-under for Mets wins here this season. 90.5. The number was at -110.
Man, this is right on the line here. It was funny because I saw it weeks ago at 92.5. 90.5, I'm going to say I'm going to say that they're going over, but this is going to be a sweat. This is like they're going over, they're winning 91. So I'm going to take the over, which means they're probably winning 78 games this year.
I am also going to take the over here. Talked about how many games that Juan Soto adds to a team.
Right.
Now, I know the rotation is right now the big concern for this team. We saw it last year, got them to 89 wins. If this team is an 89 win team and you add Juan Soto, I'm thinking 92, 93. So we're not really that far off. Maybe the 93 is a little bit, but I think that he could give them about 4 more wins this season.
Yes, and with the pitching being what it is, we think that now it'll be much better, hopefully by June, by that point, and then we'll be feeling a little bit more safe and secure. This team does not win 100 games, you don't think, right?
No.
They can't max out like that.
No, I don't think so.
97, Carlos, man, 97 for the Mets. I mean, I'd love to see it. I can't see it though.
Not for me, not this year. I have to see how the Phillies start off and the Braves start off as well.
We can't forget that. We kind of, I don't want to say we're giving a gift or anything, but the Braves are very stacked too, and they were all hurt last year. So it's just, that's going to be a big problem.
D says 91 wins. He's right in line with you.
Yep.
Sydney McGrath saying around 95, 96 until they prove her wrong.
Okay.
Stanley Babbage also with you at 91 wins. So
this is going to be a sweat. Like, we're going to be chewing our finger. We're going to be making this bet now. And then by like the last week of September, we're going to be chewing our fingers off because we want to hit this over.
To make the playoffs. Now I got you can see the numbers at the bottom scroll right there. Los Angeles Dodgers minus 2,500, Atlanta minus 400, Philly minus 265, Mets minus 250. And then you got obviously Chicago. I don't know how the Chicago Cubs are ahead of Arizona, San Diego, and Milwaukee, but they are. You taking the Mets here to make the playoffs? I am.
The Kyle Tucker effect for the Cubs, by the way.
There you go.
I am taking the reason the odds are minus 250. I'm in lockstep with the majority or the overwhelming majority. Even if they don't win the division, they're getting in the playoffs. I almost want to say that the NL East is going to have 3 teams in that mix.
They have to, right? I mean,
again, you can't forget about the Braves. You just can't forget about Atlanta, man. They've got a ton of talent, and I know they're starting out still a little bit hurt. But that's going to be a big time beating each other up situation, triple threat between the Mets, the Phillies, and the Braves.
I'm surprised that they have Chicago over Milwaukee, but I guess, like you said, the Kyle Tucker effect, is in play there to win the NL East. And this is where Carlos comes into play here. Atlanta plus 110, Philly plus 215, the Mets plus 240. Washington plus 6, we'll leave out Washington and Miami. It's just there for fodder. But I think I'm staying away from this one.
Yeah, no, I'm not betting that.
Yeah, it's not.
It's even if I thought they could do it, it's just not a smart bet.
It's too risky.
Make. Yes, because the Phillies are that good. The Braves are that good. And there's no clear-cut winner here. You see it by the odds. They're all very close. That signals you stay away.
You talk about rotations. I mean, the Phillies are pretty stacked right now, especially after getting the guy from the Marlins. So they are.
I have a bet that Zach Wheeler leads the NL in strikeouts this year.
He's been just so good. I don't know how we let him get out of our hands.
I know. Wait, I remember how they got him. They got him trading Beltran, I believe.
They did in San Francisco, yeah.
And who'd they get rid of him for? Like, I mean, I'm trying to even remember who they would have gotten rid of him for back in the day.
Who the Mets got rid of him for?
Or did he just sign
out?
No,
he hit free agency, and Brody Van Wagen thought that he was not worth the money, and that was that was something in itself.
Wow, Brody Van Wagen, and that is a 1-page terrible hellish chapter. That's like 1 page long.
Yep, it goes right under the Wilpons wing, and fitting that's how it ended for the Wilpons.
Great though. I mean, you talk about these New York teams and how many of them have had bad management. The Mets, the Knicks, and you still see some of the, the management issues with like the Jets, but isn't it great when you have like awesome all into the team ownership? They'll spend there, obviously not endless amounts, but they'll spend, and then good management right under them. It's like for so long, the Mets didn't have that, I feel like.
Yeah. I'm so happy that they were gone.
Yeah.
I really am. And I
Wilpons
actually
weren't going
have
to sign Wheeler. The Wilpons wouldn't sign anybody if it were up to them.
no. We would not have both. Actually, we would not have 3 players in 7-8 year contracts like Lindor, Nimmo, and definitely wouldn't have a 15-year contract with Soto. So, there's that. NL champions. I'm also going to stay away from this one.
Yeah. Again,
The
they
same.
can win it. They can win the National League, but the problem is you've got a freaking juggernaut in there, and let alone their own division, who they had to experience with Philadelphia last year in the playoffs. You got the Dodgers, man. It's going to take a lot of injuries for the Dodgers to not go to the World Series.
So that's the same thing then with the World Series itself. You stay away from it. But is it kind of good that the Dodgers have all this momentum right now on paper that maybe you slip a little bit in there and see if maybe you can hit on it?
Yes, you don't bet the farm on it, but you're getting long odds with a lot of the other teams because the Dodgers are so favored. So yes, that's a situation where you can at the long odds that they provide. Because those odds within the first 2 months, let's say the Mets start hot, those odds are changing instantly.
What are some of the bets that you had on? Because then we'll go and wrap up with the award futures.
So for me, I have my favorite Met bet future to place. Pete Alonso over 33.5 home runs. You can find it. It's 35.5 on FanDuel, but this is where you need to odd shop. And depending on what state you're in, there are different books that are available. If you have Caesars, it's at 33.5, and I think that it could go over. Like I said before, Pete Alonso, this is a contract year for him. Funny to think about it, but I think he's opting out no matter what. I don't think he's going to necessarily, I think it's more on the line if he's not going to be with the Mets after this year. So being that it is a contract year and it's almost the Scott Boras revenge narrative coming up, Pete Alonso is going to be hitting a lot of dingers there to help up his value going into next offseason. So I have him going over 33.5. So that's one right there. And then I want to get your take on this, Anthony. Juan Soto at 33.5. Now, he just went over it last year, has gone over it the last couple of years. I mean, even in San Diego, not a hitter's ballpark at all. What do you think about Juan Soto going over 33.5?
I think he can. He had 40, right? He had 40 last season.
Yeah, he's a power guy. He's very, very big.
With Aaron Judge hitting behind him, he had 40. Pete Alonso behind him. I think he can. I think he can because I don't know if you've seen a lot of his games at Citi Field. He absolutely demolishes balls at Citi Field. Like his home runs at Citi Field are absolute no doubt shots. Right. And I feel like he'll be able to do that. You got Francisco Lindor ahead of him doing his work and to get on base for him. I think that is perfect. When you look at Alonso too, I'm going to take the over on Alonso as well, because if you think about it, Alonso's kind of the side chick this season, right? Last season, he was so important to this offense and being that provider. He's not that guy. He doesn't have to be that guy anymore, right? We saw what Lindor did. We saw what Soto can do. Nimmo is another guy. And now they got Mark Vientos as well. So Pete Alonso doesn't have to be so nervous in getting all of these big at-bats anymore.
Right. And again, I think the number is very low for him, and he's proven he can go over as he has. And I'll say this too with Pete Alonso. I mean, again, being that this is a contract year for him, this was the first prop I saw when I was looking it up before, when I was looking over the last few days on futures, and I bet it right away, man. I see him getting in the late 30s, maybe even hitting 40.
You got any more? Were those the only two that you had for us?
So I've got one other one here, okay, and that is Francisco Lindor and his stolen bases. I think he's going to be a monster threat. Doesn't get caught too much. I think he has a bunch of years where he only got caught like 4 times. It's an amazing percentage. 25.5. He's not going to crush this number, but I think he's going to go over it by a few bags. I think you're looking at 28 to 30 for him.
See, the thing I always wonder about with him is now, how will he, react with his back? Like, will he take
Right.
it easy to start the season? And because we don't know the severity of that back issue that he has. Those are chronic issues. They can come back at any time. So does he take a back step to stealing a lot of bases and try to emphasis with it more in other spots? If it's 20, how many bags do you know how many bags he stole last year? I forgot off the top of my head.
I had it. It was like 25-27, which is what made me very attracted to this prop. Hang on one second. He had last year, 2024, 29.
29 stolen bases. All right, I'll take the over on
So
that.
we're asking for 26, so it's still
Yeah.
a minor downgrade from last year. But yeah.
So if he hits 26, do we hit? Or it's
Yes.
26 and a half,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's 25 and a half.
25. Okay, so it's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would take it.
Yeah. No, and I'm in there too. And it makes me wonder as well with the Mets if they're thinking that maybe, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like any kind of like Barry Bonds treatment. He gets on, he steals, Soto's up. Do they walk him? Okay. Now you got two guys on for Alonso. So,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if teams may opt to do that. Well, look, we can pitch to Soto here, or we pitch to Alonso with the extra guy on. So I think the Mets are going to want to put teams in that position a lot.
Carlos Ramos saying, I'll take over 25 stolen bases for Lindor. He will be froggy with Soto batting behind him.
Kind of goes along somewhat with what I was just saying there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got.
Mets can end up with two guys on, nobody out, and now this kind of plays into what's Nimmo and Vientos are going to do. Now you've got multiple guys on. They might be coming up with the bases juiced, no outs. It's huge.
So many possibilities with this lineup. I just hope that we get to see a full lineup with Francisco Alvarez back, and I don't know. I'm not too keen on Jeff McNeil. It is what it is with him right now, but I want a full lineup.
The hamate bone is it's a bone, and this is weird. It's like you don't need the hamate bone. It's like you don't necessarily need it, and what that means is, as weird as it sounds, he should be coming back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, my only issue is I don't want to rush him. No, because that's his catching hand, right? And like. He could do without, like, if they're going to get rid of the bone, I guess so, right? But if the bone's still there and he's catching, that could become an issue.
Right. Yeah, that is a little bit of a problem.
All right, we got two more bets here. Did you have any other ones, or was just those?
No,
three?
I was going to say Mark Vientos 83.5. I was originally going to go like we kind of talked about that earlier. I was very into the under, but then the last, hour 20 of this conversation has me kind of wondering if he's going to be right around that line, simply because of the dynamics of the lineup.
You said, what was it,
83.5.
I will take the under.
Yeah.
But go maybe 80, 81.
So he'll be right there.
Because he'll be batting fifth. I mean, he'll have the opportunities. To score a lot of runs with these guys getting on base. It's a tough one. I feel like I have to stay away from this one.
I was very much on the under, and then our conversation weirdly kind of brought me more back into Mark Vientos being able to hit like 80 plus ribbies. So that might now be a no bet for me. But the Pete Alonso one, I'm smashing.
It's the thing that, like we said earlier, about seeing what he can do with a second full season. Like maybe if he had another really good season and then we're brought into this next year, maybe it's like I can feel more confident and sure in betting on that.
You know what's cool about Mark Vientos too? It's he hits the home runs that he hits are like to the deepest parts of the ballpark and everything.
Yeah.
Like you think about the one against the Phillies. I mean, it's the deepest shot that you have. And I know that Citizens Bank ballpark's very different than a lot of other ballparks in that regard, but that just shows just how much power this guy has in the progression we saw throughout the year.
Yep. Absolutely. We got two more here. I got award futures.
Okay.
I'll put the scroll up here for MVP. Now I only put the Mets players up here. See if you'll take any of them. Juan Soto plus
Vientos at plus 4,000.
He was on there. Yep. Soto 550, Lindor 1,600, Pete Alonso 5,000, Mark Vientos 4,000. So maybe let me ask this: if you is this the correct ranking? Do you think for these guys for MVP?
Yes, I do. I think that this is perfect. I would put Lindor ahead of Alonso.
even on the walk year. Now that he has Soto ahead of him, still sticking with that?
Yes. I mean, look, now that Juan Soto's on the team, I mean, you look the face of the team for the future. Right now, though, Francisco Lindor to me is the heart and soul of this team.
Oh yeah,
and I think with him at the top of the lineup, again, going back to the overall strategy at the bottom of the lineup is going to get pitches to hit. He's going to be coming up with runners on a lot, and he's going to make it hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a testament to Mark Viento's season last year to get himself on this list at plus 4,000 to be an MVP. I mean, you would have never thought last season heading into that we'd see this opportunity.
Had better odds. Wait, I'm looking at the scroll here. So Pete Alonso's at plus 5,000 and he's at plus 4,000. Wow.
I'm gonna have to check that. Maybe I have maybe it's plus 40,000. I may have.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's wrong. I think I skipped a zero there.
No, and by the way, I wasn't trying to call you out or anything.
No.
Whoa, his odds are worse than Alonso?
He was way lower on the list towards the end, so it has to be plus 40,000. I think I that was a little error slip on my end. When it goes to Cy Young, here are the Mets in play. Kodai Senga plus 2,800, Sean Manaea plus 55, Clay Holmes at plus 10,000, and even Edwin Diaz at plus 20,000. We're staying away from this.
Staying away from it. No way. No way.
I agree.
Especially with what and again, I'm viewing things objectively too, especially with what I just told you about, like some of my Zach Wheeler futures that I have. I know it stings Mets fans to hear that. These guys don't come close to Zach Wheeler.
Yeah, they don't. They just don't. And you also got Paul Skeens out there.
Yeah.
That has the opportunity. It's just so many more ace type pitchers that are out there that have the opportunity to win the Cy Young. Although there is a guy, Rick Porcello, he did win the Cy Young once. So
he did.
You never know.
He also one time took down Kevin Youkilis, who was running at him like a freaking bear. Do you remember that? He hit Kevin Youkilis. This was like in 2010, 2011. Youkilis comes, I believe this happened. Youkilis comes charging at him, but Porcello was a high school wrestler. So he's coming at Porcello. Porcello like ducks under and takes him down. The Greek god of walks.
I just remember Rick Porcello being on the Mets and it just being an awful year, an absolute awful year.
Add him to the list, Jason Bay. Add him to the list.
Unbelievable. Before we wrap up this show, I just want to give a couple of quick shout outs here. I talked about earlier, was on New York One. Thanks to Rocco Vertuccio for bringing me aboard to be a part of the New York baseball season preview. We had Hector Beauchamp, who's on Yankees Morning Brew, Latino Sports, and Uptown Sports TV, representing the Yankee fans. Shout out to Doc Gooden for a great conversation. I don't know if anyone was able to check it out. If a lot of you weren't there, the video is up on the Queens Baseball Convention. You could check out the whole panel with Doc Gooden. Great guy to talk with. A lot of great stories came out of him. Shout out to Keith Blacknick, the media goon, and the QBC staff, as well as the lovely staff at Catch Astoria for allowing me to be a part of that. And obviously the Mets for putting on a great show today for the What Is New event. They showed us all the giveaways they're going to be having. I tried a lot of food. Like I mentioned earlier to start, I had an interview with Adam Richman, who is one of the nicest guys you could. Chef Adam Richman, one of the nicest guys, got great burgers out there if you're a big burger guy. And it was a lot of fun to be out there. So
can I ask about the giveaways, or are you not
sure.
allowed to spill any secrets? Okay.
They're already out. Most of them are already out.
All right. Well, I can't turn I'm going to try to turn. I have this, as you all can see, I have this sports broadcaster bobblehead collection. And if you look on the second row, I've got the Gary, Keith, and Ron bobbleheads along with the Howie bobblehead that came out 2 years ago, I believe it was at this point. So last year or the year before, whatever. Are there any fun bobbleheads coming out this year?
There's no broadcaster bobbleheads. Because I actually have the one Keith Hernandez one. I don't have.
You don't have the other two?
I don't have the other two.
You gotta get them. You gotta get
the
other two.
I gotta figure out how to get the other two.
eBay, they have them all.
Yeah, I have this Keith Hernandez, and I have an extra version of the Keith Hernandez one, and then I have one from his playing days as well. But it was mostly players. It was I know there's a Vientos one, there's a Francisco Alvarez one.
Do any of them like talk at all or anything when you push the button?
That they haven't said yet.
Okay.
They have a Mrs. Met one that's coming out, and Mr. Met. Like they have so many days. I have to really go back and check, but I know for sure that there's no broadcaster ones.
Well, shout out to my cousin Jordan, who never misses a Mets home game, let alone one with a giveaway.
That's you got to get them somehow.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You got to get there early too, man. Like you got to take like the first train you can there. They go quickly.
Let me tell you, there's one that I have back here. It's the one closest. It's a Thor, a actual Thor Noah Syndergaard bobblehead. The line for that bobblehead went all the way to the back of the parking lot. Luckily, I was there early enough to avoid that. But when I saw that, I said, I don't know if these bobbleheads are worth it enough for me to go and wait on a long line like that. But it's Fensty, another great year with you. I feel like we have to do this more often. Just to have you on, even if it's not for betting, just to have you on as a guest, just talk Mets during the season.
You know where to find me, man. You know where to find me. And it's like, I know I'm like a huge like basketball guy and all, and obviously football, but I love baseball very much. Out of going to the sports live, there's nothing more exciting and more authentic than going to a baseball game live. I love the Mets very much, and I want to see them win. I know I just talked about Pete Alonso and what I think for the future. I don't want Pete Alonso to leave, but the way this contract is, you just got to kind of accept that there's a pretty big possibility that A, he's opting out, and B, he's not going to be on the Mets. But Anthony, you know where to find me. I'll talk Mets with you anytime. And coming off that amazing run that was very unexpected, if you go back to the early summer, it was a gift, man. And now hopefully we get another one with a nice, successful season.
And you have to let me know when you come out here so that we can go to a game.
Yes. Am I going up to New York at all this summer? We'll have to see. Maybe early summer. I really wanted to go to David Wright Day. I love David Wright so much. I know you'll be there. You probably were the first person to get tickets. So yeah, I'm jealous because unfortunately I got something coming up around then, so I won't be able to make it to David Wright Day. But dude, even though he's not like one of the greatest baseball players of all time, just one of the greatest athletes of at least my generation. And just a hell of a guy too, like working in radio and seeing him come on like my station as much as he did, couldn't be a nicer guy.
Absolutely. I met him 2005, his first full season in the parking lot. One of the only Mets to come out, take a picture with every single person that was standing out there. That's to show you what kind of a guy that David Wright was. And I'm excited to see him I saw his last game. I've been to a lot of his games. We've both been to a lot of his games during that 2006 and even beyond run. But the last game,
when he hit that ball over Johnny Damon's head to beat Mariano, and Paul LaDuca comes in scoring with his arms held up, that was and I've been to 2 World Series wins. By the way, 2, not many people you'll meet that have been to 2 World Series wins for the Mets, seen it in person. That game in 2006 during the Subway Series when the Yankees came to town and they beat Mariano, and you saw Shea Stadium just exploding like it was the greatest things, and the Yankees fans all crying, walking out. You thought at that point, or at least I did, Anthony, that 2006 team was truly the team of destiny.
The last time that I fully believed that they were going to win a championship, that broke my heart. I know a lot of people talk about 88. I didn't get to see 88.
Right.
2006 broke me. Yeah. 2006 broke me, and being in the stands in 2007 for that Tom Glavine game, that was the nail in the coffin.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
I was at the first day of an internship at NBC in DC, and my boss, the sports director, was a Phillies fan. He was from Philadelphia.
yeah,
He was riding me the whole day. It sucked. Glavin lasted. Did he even last an out? Did he even get an out? I don't think he did.
I think he got one out.
Yeah, and then what
They hooked him.
the Marlins scored like what 8 runs that
Yeah.
inning? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in 2025.
Yes.
It's all good things now. we got to be happy and think about good things.
No 2022 BS and no
Oh,
2007 BS.
No, absolutely not. Fensty, let everyone know where they can find you.
Sure.
I know you're at Fensty Sports on X. What else you got going on and coming up?
Sure. At Fensty Sports on X and Instagram. You can catch me on SiriusXM, normally channel 87, which is the fantasy sports channel, also talks just games in general, sports wagering. Going to be doing some night stuff there Monday through Friday for the next few months, and also going to be doing some weekend stuff for them as well. And you can find all my work at fantasyguru.com. I'm the lead NBA analyst there, and I also do some NFL work. I'm a 3-sport guy: basketball, football, baseball. Love covering the majors, and it's just amazing getting to hang out with you and seeing what you've done with this podcast. And I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your ass. I'm proud of you, man. Like, seeing you involved, seeing you get to interview Dr. K. You put in that hard work, and that's why your podcast is what it is right now.
I appreciate you, Fensty. I hate to wax poetic all the time, but I really do miss being on the playbook with you, Aronis, Adam Bernard, and putting together all of those baseball previews was such a great time being a part of that. That was probably the best time that I had on the Better Sports Network. I got to be 100% honest with you there. Not blowing smoke up you as well.
Yeah.
Saying that.
You know what, man? I think about it all the time. I mean, us four, it was just 4 New York guys that grew up in different parts of New York. I mean, Ronas grew up. I forget where you exactly grew up. I grew up on the North Shore of Long Island in Oyster Bay, Billy Joel country. I forget
Flushing for me.
What's that?
Flushing, Queens for me. Whitestone
for you. Ronas in Flushing, Queens. Adam Bernard, AB, wherever he grew up. I mean, having the 4 New York guys and the New York camaraderie there, and just being able to just have fun talking sports and bust each other's chops, man, it made for a fun every day. It's not even a job.
Well, I appreciate you, and you're going to be on here with me. I always reach out to you to do this show. It's always great having you on. Justin Fensterman, Fensty in the house for Subway to Shea. We got through the entire season preview. The games start on Thursday. I think it's at 6:10. G-Money Stacks put that in the chat. 6:10 against the I think the whole pregame and all that stuff starts at 6:10, and then the game gets underway. But the Mets, Astros in Houston, then they go to Miami, and then they come home for the Toronto Blue Jays to start the home portion of opening day. But for Anthony Rivera, for Justin Fensterman, shout out to 180 of you who came in and joined the chat to be a part of this show. We appreciate you all. Enjoy the start of the season. And as always, let's go Mets.